Okay, members, this is HB 409, provides relative to campus safety and accountability. And if you're, I don't know if the overflow room is ready yet. If we have anybody waiting outside, we have a few seats. No, okay, all right, not yet. And Representative Hilford, are you going to the table with Representative? So we have two committee members at the table today.
Well, I will tell you, I invited all my female colleagues to the table. I forgot to tell you that, Mr. Chair. But some prefer to sit in their seats, and but we did work on this as a women's caucus, so I just felt the need to invite.
Okay, I'm being facetious. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Representative Freeman, on your bill.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Of course, I'm honored to be a member of this committee because I'm always about students first. We seem to be having a thematic conversation on all the bills in that way today. And so, as many of you know, this particular bill began being a discussion because of the hearings that Chairwoman Senator Barrow had at the Senate Select Committee for Women and Children, and she graciously invites House caucus members of the Women's Caucus to come. So I have to first very much thank Senator Barrow for holding those hearings, and we all know that these were news stories that have been going on for months, and they do involve LSU, but the truth is that those hearings were a necessary part of the discussion. So for members who didn't have an opportunity to see those, we had a lot of testimony from different people from Board of Regents, higher education, board members, survivors of sexual assault. And so people would call and say, what can y'all do? What can you do? Because people want action when they're upset, right? And my constant error is what we can do is we can file legislation. So we've really worked together. We know that there was some legislation already in place, but I really wanted to first thank all the people who worked on this together. I'd be remiss if I must thank staff member Elizabeth Bourne. Ms. Bourne has tirelessly worked on this with us. The Board of Regents has worked with us, the entire Women's Caucus, and our Executive Director, Trin Johnson, has kept us all very organized. So I'm honored to carry this bill and to work with all of you as we move forward. So I felt the need to give a thank you in the beginning. So thank you for everybody who's helped. So what this bill does is it looks at Title IX, and I would be remiss. I need to thank the governor for working with this as well. The governor and his staff have worked very closely on this as well. It allows for us to revisit some of the Title IX requirements and be a bit more stringent. And so power-based violence was the original word in this particular bill. And after some discussion, I have looked to change that to power-based abuse, which is in the amendments. But I just want to tell you that before we introduce the amendments, so you know that that covers a lot of the amendments that I'll be discussing. So really what I'm trying to do is have students have safety and accountability. And when we had these cases brought before us, there was a lot of who was in charge. And so some things weren't reported correctly. So we know that LSU might be the story that was in the papers, but we know that this happens on all campuses. So what we wanted to do is make sure that the reporting was in order, that everyone would be able to report, that there would be accountability. And one of the things this bill does is to make sure that survivors have access to what they need, and that when people are in the mandatory reporting role, that they will make sure that those reports move in the correct directions so that action can be taken on their behalf. We have a termination piece in here. It's based on a law that we looked at in Texas, that if you're not going to report, then you should be terminated. So that's the overview of the bill. I know I can't say it's a simple bill, but I can say that it addresses all the levels of trying to keep our students safe. It's for the survivors, the students, the parents, the alumni, because everyone deserves to have protection and comprehensive data that does exist to help them be safe on campus. And I'm happy to answer questions about the bill. I know
Why-
many of you have asked me questions, but I mean, there's a lot of
Why don't we go ahead and adopt the amendment first?
Okay.
If that's okay?
the 52 amendments.
Yeah, well, the amendment set, I guess.
Okay.
Let me be a little more precise.
Okay.
Members, I'll go ahead and offer up amendment set 1034 for, we could offer them yourself, but
Thank you for offering them.
amendment set 1034 for Representative Freeman. That should be in your folders. And of course, for those who are watching, these amendments are online. Do you want staff to describe them, or do you want to describe them?
I think Ms. Bourne and I talked yesterday, and if I get something wrong, I know she'll kind of give me a little wave, and
So we'll
I'll
work
let
together?
her correct
Okay,
me.
that's good.
But yes, so there are 52 amendments, but 24 of the amendments are simply changing power-based violence to power-based abuse, because after discussions with other universities and actually people at the Board of Regents, the term violence doesn't cover everything, so we have looked into it, and abuse actually allows us to cover not just sexual assault, but harassment, cyber stalking. There are other ways that there's power-based abuse. So 24 of the amendments simply change violence to abuse. And then 8 of them are technical, confirming to the amendments. And maybe, Elizabeth, Ms. Bourne, can you help me as far as like going through each one on the ones that have specific changes? I don't have that sheet in front of me. I apologize. I do have the engrossed bill with my notes in it.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman and members. Since this is such a lengthy set of amendments, I thought that Ms. Freeman and I talked about I could just sort of give you a general sort of bulleted list of the main substantive changes. I think that would be easier for everybody to digest, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman. So as Ms. Freeman said, a good half of the amendments are changing power-based violence to power-based abuse. Between 8 and 10 are technical amendments or conforming amendments, changing A's to B's, 1s to 2s, that kind of thing. And the substantive amendments can basically be summarized by this list. The amendments add a requirement that the management boards give an annual report to the Board of Regents on the incidences at campuses under their jurisdiction. They specify that the memoranda of understanding between campuses and law enforcement have to actually be written, and they have to be signed by all parties.
And I'd like to speak to that amendment, because what we realized is that these MOUs between the universities and campus police and any other law enforcement policies were not being all signed off on together. So sometimes it wasn't clear if someone had a report, like, was it the campus police who were supposed to do this, or was it local law enforcement? And so the MOU, bringing everybody to the table, including the DAs who have supported us into putting this language together, so that everybody knows what the responsibilities are, because that was one of the reasons that people would say, well, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to report or somebody else is supposed to report. But if you have the MOUs in place with all the parties, they will be clear. And so that's the purpose of this
So
amendment.
the MOU is not changing. You're just adding additional parties to the MOU.
And signing one. And I know Dr. Hunter Reed can talk a little bit more about this if needed.
She's nodding. So,
yeah, but it became apparent through discussions that some MOUs were signed with just the
police department.
And so we're trying to make sure that everyone is talking ahead of time, so that if someone makes a report, they know where to go.
Next amendment. Okay. I didn't turn you off. I don't know what happened.
I might have turned myself off on accident. I apologize. The bill also tweaks the present law that has to do with the Board of Regents' uniform policy on all of these issues to address the way that institutions communicate with each other about transferring students, not only the transfer of the students, but the transfer of their transcripts. And it specifies that they need to communicate about students against whom complaints have been made to the Title I coordinator, and they need to withhold the transcripts against, when those students are trying to transfer until the disciplinary and adjudication process is complete.
And the reason this one came about is for some of those who didn't see, but there was testimony about a particular perpetrator who was transferring around to schools that continued to sexually assault and assault women. And so that we realized like there needs to be something in place so that the schools can communicate with each other. Because if someone is in the process of a complaint, we shouldn't be letting them move around until that is resolved.
Okay, and is that it?
Just a couple of more.
I just wanted to get.
But before we move on, is that going to be through database, or do we have something in place that we can do that
Dr.
with?
Hunter Reed, I think, can answer that question
Okay,
better than I can. So
note that question for me, Dr.
for
Reed.
her. Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Bourne.
That's fine. We have a couple of more. Miss Freeman's bill originally adds that the training on all of these issues also needs to be given to the management board members, and she has an amendment to also pull in the Board of Regents members to that as well. And the last sort of substantive change is Ms. Freeman originally proposed to have the climate survey that's required under present law be given annually, and she's reverting back to the present law where it be given every 3 years.
And initially, I thought, well, gosh, we should do this every year, right? Why aren't we surveying the students every year? But after discussing with some of the universities who have their Title IX offices in place and functioning well, doing a survey annually is not the answer to getting more participation. It's that there is a reason for doing it every 3 years, but you just have to figure out, because students aren't participating. And so we have to figure out, we can do it every 3 years, but we need to have incentives for participating so we know the climate of the university setting.
Okay, we have a few questions on the amendments. We're good. Thank you, Ms. Bourne. Okay, Representative Aimee for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And we're still on the amendments.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I do have a question specific to amendment number 44, which is the one about withholding of transcripts. And what I would like is if we have any attorneys available who can speak to questions of due process, because the current law says that this applies to a student seeking a transfer with pending disciplinary action relative to sexually oriented complaints. But the language that we're moving to says any student seeking a transfer against whom a complaint has been reported. So if a complaint has been reported, that's a little bit earlier in the process. So I would hope to, since I'm not an attorney, I would hope to have somebody speak about due process.
I would need an attorney to come to the table to answer that question, but I do know that we developed it because of the fact that there were these perpetrators who were transferring around and continuing to assault women and men.
Oh, absolutely. I
So
understand the need.
that was part of the discussion, and
Right.
I'm trying to. I think, yes, from Star. You can answer that.
Thank you.
Good
Good
they have
morning,
been very instrumental. Thank you so much. I forgot to thank you in the beginning for being here and for being a big part of helping us.
What's the name, please?
My name is Arizola Cleaves, and I'm an attorney with STAR. I'm one of the staff attorneys.
And can you just tell us STAR, the acronym?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response.
Okay, please go ahead.
And so one of the reasons for the amendment, one of the reasons for that particular language is so that there's still an investigation process ongoing. And so one of the problems is what we're seeing is that the student is transferring from school to school to school and is, in essence, getting away from the investigation process. The schools are not speaking to each other. And so then you have this student who is essentially perpetrating on other students at other institutions. And so once it is in a posture and in a place where this investigation, and once this investigation is complete, then the student will be able to do whatever they want to do. So I don't believe it does impinge upon their process of where they're able to go next.
Okay, so we're saying that the school would simply withhold the transcript. Would it be safer to avoid lawsuits concerning due process if they simply notated on the transcript that there is an investigation pending? That way we're solving the communication problem and we're not putting our universities in danger of a lawsuit based on due process.
I think they still need to withhold the transcript because we're still assuming that the schools are going to essentially do the right thing. And we're assuming that the schools are going to read it and abide by that. But instead, it really is trying to keep the student, the actual student, from going to place to place to place. And so I think that by withholding the transcript and not allowing the student to just transfer to another school as they wish, I think it gets us to that point.
So when this student would be applying to another university, is the current university communicating anything, or are they just simply not sending a transcript? Are they going to say something like, we can't release the transcript yet? I mean, what communication does take place?
I'm not exactly sure on how the universities are communicating with each other.
Well, under the amendment, what does the amendment require?
So I'm not exactly sure what is currently happening when one student is trying to go to another school, but what the amendment would have is that the school would keep the transcript, and I think the school could report to their school, we have it, we're just withholding it. I don't think that's a problem.
Well,
Ms.
maybe
Bonet?
we could ask a school, what do they do under the current law when there is an actual disciplinary action pending, formal investigation moving forward? What's happening right now in that case? Are they communicating at all? Are they saying we can't send the transcript? Are they saying there's an investigation? Because if we know that, then we know what would change under this.
Representative Aimee, Representative Hill-30 could answer this question too.
I think, and we can certainly hear from the schools, but I think from what we heard in committee testimony was that there was no process, a formal process. So it was a school by school and maybe even a situation by situation basis. And that's what we're trying to codify here, is that there is a specific process, and that helps our schools as well to know that this is the process to follow. It can also help students to understand what the process to follow is, so that it's not done on a school by school or student by student basis.
Right. And I had briefly asked Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid a question along these lines. Could I ask her to come and comment if she'd like to?
Can we do that after we're finished with the people at the table?
Oh, sure, as long as we're still on the amendment.
Yeah, okay, we can do that too.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
any other questions on the amendment?
No, that was the only one.
Okay, for these, for our esteemed committee members? Okay, I'll turn Ms. Bonet off. Representative Wright, you have a question?
Thank you. Just a simple question. As you mentioned, a lot of the amendments have to do with going from power-based violence to sexual abuse. So when I'm reading this and then kind of looking at the amendments, I just want to make sure I'm clear what I understand. The original drafted bill was changing, for example, assault to power-based violence. And then the amendments are saying, no, we're going to use sexual abuse. Is that correct?
No, the amendments are saying that we're going to use power-based abuse
Power-based.
instead of power-based violence. So that's why 26 of those amendments were scratching the word violence and using the word abuse. And it's what I've learned from my research and talking to others is that that's a better term because it covers things besides sexual assault. It covers assault. It covers cyber stalking. In fact, last week I had a young student I know who had to go file a report because of a cyber stalking incident. So there was no actual physical harm to her, but she had to go report something to police about a cyber stalker. So we realized that the term abuse broadens the definition.
And just to be clear, so the idea of a power-based, right, is somebody who has some ability or authority over an employee, right? That's the basic part of it.
Well, it's just it could be student against student, so it's not necessarily an employee or coach. It's just a more broad way of somebody sort of taking power over somebody else in some form that's harmful. Does that?
No,
does
that's
that
fine.
answer?
I think you said this, but you've taken it from other uses, right? So
Yes.
this is not something.
No, I didn't
I'm
invent
sure
the
you
term.
could come up with
I did,
good. No,
I
right.
did not invent the term, and there is some discussion amongst advocacy groups about what is the right term. There's even a third term that's now come before me in the discussion process. And this bill was kind of germinated through those committee hearings, and more discussions have happened. So, especially right now, we're looking to redefine how domestic violence is written, and Representative White has a bill on that she had filed and has gotten. I think it's gotten off the House floor at this point. So that when I started talking to other women in the Women Caucus, we realized we should try to be consistent in some sort of definition. So,
Okay.
but I'm not married to the words, if that's what you're asking, because I am trying to get up the best possible term. And that's where I landed in the amendments. So
No, I'm not suggesting any kind of changes. I
Okay.
just want to make sure I understand what I'm reading. And, I appreciate your and Representative Hilferty and everybody in the caucus pursuing this. I mean, just for the records, very disappointed to have seen what happened, and we've discussed about going forward. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate that, Reverend Wright, because I can say, there are only 26 women in this legislature, but I feel very well supported by the men who have personally come up to speak to me personally, I can speak for, to say, I really appreciate the work you're doing, and for, the men to respect and allow us to lead this conversation. And there are some survivors who are here today, so I do know that I just want to state this is kind of started as a women's caucus issue, but there are some men survivors that some of them may be here to testify today. They've come to committees before. So thank you.
Okay, Representative Wright. Now, I think it's safe to say that everybody up here is supportive of correcting the issues that we've had. I don't think there's any question about that. I guess my question would be somewhat along the lines of Representative Amee's.
Could I invite Dr. Reed to come have my seat so she can answer that question?
That might be. Representative Hilford, before you get up, do you want to make a statement? Or
Look, I appreciate the time, and I do. This is something for our past students, our current students, and our future students. And I think the last thing any one of us sitting here wants to hear is that the same events are happening. And when we talk about this, we are going to do everything we can to try to prevent violence on our campuses and against our students. But what we absolutely can prevent is that if one incidence of violence is reported and investigated, that we don't allow that perpetrator to keep committing acts of violence on our campus. And unfortunately, that's the horrific thing that was uncovered with the reporting that's been happening at LSU. And so that is what we are looking to codify the reporting requirements so that we don't have these instances where perpetrators are either, in some instances, those reports are not reported to the appropriate parties, or situations are handled differently depending on who the perpetrator is. And so I appreciate Rep. Freeman's work. I appreciate my fellow caucus members' work. And while there's a lot of sunshine on what's happening at LSU right now, we want to ensure that these mechanisms are in place so that 2 years from now, we're not looking at the same incidents, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I appreciate everyone's work on this. I appreciate everyone's support and feedback as we work through these instruments. Thank you.
And Representative Phelps, you're at the table as well. Do you want to make a statement?
Thank you. I'm Representative Freeman, and the caucus work. It's been very grueling and exhausting and very heart-wrenching, all of what you can imagine. But just taking the lead on trying to just, I appreciate it.
Okay. That's, okay. All right. We're still on the amendment. If we can get Dr. Reed to the table. Representative Hilford, you can come back up. She may have a question for you, too.
Thank you, Dr. Reed.
Representative Aimee, you want to go with your question first?
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Kim Hunter-Reid, Commissioner of Higher Education. Good morning. I think you all had 2 or 3 items. First of all, on Amendment 44, which moves the transcript hold from a hold because there's a pending hearing to a hold because there is a complaint. The bottom line, and I was talking with my assistant presidents because I want to make sure that I accurately reflect what's happening on campuses. The bottom line is the hold does not remove the due process for the student. The due process will continue. The hold only keeps a student from skipping from campus to campus to avoid a hearing. So the hearing would occur. The due process still occurs, but the transcript would not be released in this amendment until, because a complaint has occurred. In current law, the transcript hold is triggered by a hearing. In this amendment, the transcript hold is triggered by a complaint. In both cases, the due process would happen in terms of a hearing, but it's just a question of when the transcript would be released.
Thank you. That's the clarity I was hoping for.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. So the goal is to prevent school hopping?
The goal is, yes, we have been made aware of a situation or two where a student, to avoid a hearing, merely asked for a transcript and moved from multiple campuses. So we're trying to close the loophole on that specific situation.
Okay. Well, let me follow up just a little bit, if you don't want to turn Representative Aimee off.
Mr. Chairman, also the universities are here to explain that as well. So if you want to bring any.
Well, no, I think I understood. That was a process question.
Yeah.
Now I'm more into the policy, and it could be, maybe it's on the bill, but because we're talking about, and we have Dr. Reed at the table, because we're talking about the transcript hold, I just wanted to make sure that I want to read for the record, and I'm not going to read it into the record, but we did have an email from SAFE, Stop Abuse for Everyone, that was objecting, and I shared this with you yesterday. And they bring up a couple of questions for me, and let me state for the record very clearly that I want to fix this issue. We don't want to ever have to have anyone, male or female, go through anything like this again. And I see Dr. Galligan's in the room, and I've been attending the Board of Supervisors meetings, and they've been doing a lot of work and spending a lot of time on this issue. And I have to commend them for really taking the bull by the horns and doing what I hope is enough to, maybe even with this bill, to stop these incidents from occurring. But they ask the question, is the withholding of transcripts, is it punitive? And I guess from as an attorney, it's simply a technical question for me. How long, if a student has to transfer because they're moving or for job purposes or something like that, and they want to transfer from south to north, how long will that occur, and how does the process work? How long does it take before the accusation to the hearing, and when the transcript would, if the student's cleared, when the transcript would then be allowed to be transmitted?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I did also ask Dr. Galligan and Dr. Belton about this. It could be weeks, depends on the complexity of the hearing. It could be longer. And so I don't have data in front of me around the average time to hearing, from complaint to hearing, but I did ask them while we were here because I anticipated that question, and so it depends on the complexity of the situation. Could be weeks, could be longer.
Sure. We all know that there are some false claims, and
Yes.
I don't want to see an innocent student. We all innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
That has not changed in our society, even though some people are trying to change it. So I just want to make sure we don't have any innocent students caught up in this. Certainly, we want the guilty students to be subject to whatever we decide as a policy they should be subject to. But it doesn't say, if it's only going to be a few weeks, it doesn't sound like it would be a tremendous burden. I don't know how often students transfer, but it is an issue that I was concerned about.
No, I appreciate that, and I do want to say I believe this bill and the other bills do speak to the urgency of reporting, but also a penalty for false reporting, because your point is an important one. We want to keep students safe. We want to send a message that to parents, to the broader community, to everyone, that we're focused on student safety, but we also want to make sure we send a clear message about false reporting as well.
Great. Well said. Okay, we have a question from, is that you, Representative St. Blanc?
Chairman pretty much summed up what I wanted to say, but holding the transcript and with the experience that we had is the time limit makes a big difference. And I have experience with a dorm that had them down, and you can't, when you didn't pay your dorm, they hold your transcript. She didn't get in medical school. Time is a big thing when we come into students like this. And you don't know, there's a lot of things that happens in the system and everything. But if somebody, wrongdoings, goes and reports and everything, and that holding that medical school, they don't wait for that. You just drop, because everybody's trying to get into it. Law school, medical school, I have real concerns about that. And I have concerns about people that want to get, this is all great, and I understand, but we really need to think this out, because it's the hardest thing in the world for presidents that's running systems and chancellors to see that things like this happen. And I'm gonna tell you, I've seen it not only in medical school, I've seen it in law school, and they'll come up and speak to it. And I know it's going to be fixed, and this has to be done. So just 100% that we got to follow. And what Representative Amity said, they got to have a process.
Right.
And this process could easily hurt people because there are people that are mad and they, and if it did happen to them and some kind of abuse or anything, and they wait till the end and get the confidence to do it and stuff, and that person needs it. And if it's the wrong thing, then we hurt somebody really bad. So we really have to think about the transfer, holding the transcript.
So, Representative St. Blanc, I made a note that you clearly, this committee is stating, and I know my colleagues are listening, there's an expectation of timely due process, is what you're speaking to. So I have made a note of that. And then to your student with medical school, we certainly, if it was a debt issue, we certainly try to work with students who have unpaid debt. So I want to make sure to state that for the record as well.
It happened, and when you get that one time and they see that in that transcript that it's whole, they move on and move on quick. And there's nobody there to say, hey, it's not right. Mm-hmm. This thing is a function of the computer that it happened close to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
So.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Lucky this position I was in, got another chance for an interview. But if it was out of state, no chance at all.
Got it.
Thank you, Rep. St. Blanc.
Mr. Chair, you had a question on MOU. Would you like me to answer that one as well?
If you can remind me as to what my question was, I'd appreciate it.
So the question was around the MOUs being in writing between law enforcement and outside campus law enforcement.
Yeah,
and outside
I don't think
law
that was my question because I would assume the MOU is in writing. Is that too big of an assumption?
No, it's not too big of an assumption, but the current law does not state that it's in writing. And so when we surveyed all of our campuses, we had 9 campuses
Had
in
a
the
handshake
state
agreement.
that some had verbal,
Mhm.
and others said we are working really hard, but we can't get local law enforcement to sign on. So the amendment requires that it's in writing and that all parties sign on.
And we're
that-
bringing in the DAs
Absolutely.
and such. Okay.
Sheriffs,
And
police.
I think that's a
Yes,
really
sir.
good idea.
Okay.
All right. And we'd like to welcome Representative White to the table as well. Thank you for working on this issue. Would you like to say something for the record?
Yes, I just appreciate the work that's been done and the consideration of this committee on such a subject matter as what we faced here, and not just here, but in a lot of places. But I just wanted to be here to show my support. I think I'm co-author. I think most of us are. And I just hope we can work through all this to make a better environment for women and men, for that matter.
Thank you, Representative White. And we appreciate you joining us today. We're still on the amendment, members. Any more questions on the amendment for Dr. Hunter Reed or Representative Freeman? All right, seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? I guess Representative Freeman would move that we adopt the amendment.
I would move that you adopt the amendments, Chairman.
Okay. Representative Freeman has moved that we adopt the amendments. Any objections? Seeing none, those amendments will be adopted. Back on the bill. Questions on the bill, members? Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about the administrative part, just to have an understanding of how we are, since this is obviously very detailed, timely as it relates to reporting. So as I work my way through a little bit, and when I get over on the note, I wanted to ask, do we have Title IX coordinators
Yes.
on all of our institutions?
Yes, sir. The campuses are required, as a federal requirement, to have Title IX coordinators. Now, if a campus has satellite campuses, branch campuses, they may have one Title IX coordinator that services multiple campuses. But we are required to have Title IX coordinators.
And that would fulfill, even though multi-campus, it would still fulfill the need for each institution?
Yes, sir. That would fulfill that responsibility.
And so, in order to make sure compliance is in order, I know that again, I serve on appropriations, so I'm looking at on the note part of this. And again, I'm in favor. I just want to understand and make sure what I'm understanding. It doesn't give a specific, but it does talk about the possibility of increased cost, but of how you're going to support with the resources that you currentently have. So do you see that within your own budgets now that your needs are going to be met in order for us to perform at the level that we're going to be expecting?
Yes, Representative Edmonds, there was significant conversation in House Appropriations, Senate Finance about this particular question, and the system presidents can speak to this. LSU has reported, I believe, $1 million in additional funding will be required to address the full reorganization and robust Title IX office that they are standing up. The other system presidents reported that they have funding to meet the requirements, the legal requirements. The question is, should we have more, right? Should we have more than just the baseline?
And I'm consistent in asking this question because I've asked this in the meeting. Mm-hmm. At this beginning of, and now we're just particularly talking about LSU, right. But that dollar figure of $1 million, and the next year I think it went to $2.1 or $2.2 million. And my concern is that we want to know what we're getting for our money. We want to make certain that obviously if we're going to be problem solvers, you hate to always deal with money, but obviously it takes money to solve problems because it takes people to go implement those kinds of things. And, if we're going to solve the problem, I just think we ought to be upfront of trying for all of our institutions, what kind of dollars are we talking about so we can move forward on each one of our campuses. I wasn't certain, and I'm still not certain that, and look, I don't mean anything derogatory towards LSU. I just don't know of looking, will $2 million do the job? I mean, I can't answer the question. And I tried to press that issue. I think Representative Freeman would attest to the fact that I tried to press that issue. Right. That obviously this is a forefront issue for this legislature, and we're trying to deal with it with policy. But we want to make certain that we just don't deal with the policy, that we have the right thing on paper, but the practical side is we have to perform the duties.
Exactly.
And I do have concerns about that, and it's not against the bill. I'm just asking consistently so I don't know how to function on other committees unless I know.
Yes, thank you for that. So I think your point is an important one because the conversation around compliance and the cost for compliance was one issue. We know that to make sure that campuses are safe across the state of Louisiana, we need robust education and prevention. We need robust programming. We need robust training. And so collectively, there is a cost to do that and a requirement to do so if you receive federal dollars. So we certainly, as we move through this process and have this legislation and others, and thank you so much, Representative Freeman, for bringing it and for it being in the governor's package, we will be articulating with all of higher education the costs. We have a responsibility in these bills to provide training. We currently have training for Title IX coordinators and others in this work. The addition, and I think it is a smart one, is to say the management boards who have the responsibility for making sure that we're doing this right in terms of our institutions, and the Board of Regents also will have training. And so we will be doing that work as well. So currently we're looking within our operating budgets to make sure that the education, prevention, training, programming, and compliance is robust and lined up. But I think your question is an important one because I think it's important to clarify that good policy and one compliance officer or 10 does not make for a safe campus. You have to think about the collective work of education, prevention, training, and compliance with fidelity when things go south.
And if we're talking about the removal of employees due to the fact that they've not reported correctly or timely, right. Well, then we also have to consider the SOPs for each institution who's responsible to make certain that those procedures are carried out. So is the Board of Regents going to step in and make certain that each institution is providing such procedural operational procedures, or Will each institution be responsible on their own? And if so, would they vary from institution to institution or system to system?
The management boards will certainly, so the Board of Regents, as you know, is a policy and advocacy board. The management boards do oversee day-to-day operations. So the totality of these bills will be implemented between the regents and the management boards. But the employee conversation around making sure that individuals understand their responsibility as a reporter, to make sure they understand that if you do not meet your obligation, you could be terminated, and how that is communicated, trained, and what the process looks like will be the campuses with the management board oversight. This bill also requires that the Board of Regents provide an annual report, so there is much more sunshine, much more accountability, transparency, and enforcement and implementation. But we will work collectively to make sure it's done.
So I think I'm following the trail. So LSU would be responsible for not only the just their main campus, but they would be responsible for the entire system.
Right.
And you guys would give some level of oversight to make certain that they were carrying out the proper procedures as it relates to training, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's correct. The policy conversations, the training, we will certainly do collectively. And then the management boards will be making sure that their individual institutions are in compliance.
Now, as it relates to funding, you'd have the oversight. I know that you already look at not just this area, but all funding and your formulas. Will you have to sort of update what you're doing in funding? Because obviously changes in procedures, training thereof, all not just with the Title IX coordinator, but all of this is going to cost money.
Yes.
So would you include that from this point forward in funding, or you think you're already covering that?
So what the campuses have communicated so far, and I want to make sure the system presidents have an opportunity to speak, is that within their operating budgets, they have the wherewithal to address these immediate issues. As we see legislation that may expand responsibilities, then they would certainly be able to communicate with us, and we're tracking along with the bills to make sure we are able to answer your question about exactly what additional funding may be addressed. One thing that I do want to speak to that I heard when LSU testified before appropriation was around lighting and blue lights. So collectively, we need to make sure we understand how all of the campuses are doing with lighting and blue lights. Again, prevention work. So I think that we will make sure that collectively we are able to articulate as we move through the process what the cost will be. But I want to make sure, again, hit it one more time, that this is not just a compliance cost. It's the education, prevention, and training costs collectively to make sure we're doing better.
It takes one hand to the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I appreciate the lighting issues. I mean, that obviously is a capital improvement more than likely. So it's funding differences.
That's right.
That are involved in all of these. I hope you understand that I'm trying to ask some complex questions that I think our colleagues. Well, I think we should ask these questions.
Right.
Because I think sometimes what we do is we have great ideas, our hearts are passionate, we mean well, but if we don't put the left hand of policy together with the right hand of funding and implementation, then we just end up with an empty promise to our people. And I know that's not what we want to do. I think we want to collectively work towards that end, to where we provide a better day. We're talking about lights. Look, here's what I do know. Light dispels darkness. That's what it does. It doesn't make any difference if it's a floodlight or a policy. If you bring light on the subject that needs to be fixed, and you put the right kind of cooperation, whether it's legislators or board supervisors or professors for that matter, if you put that together, light thrown on an issue can remove the darkness. And what we're talking about is a dark issue.
Yes.
We don't want dark issues with our students. We don't want dark issues with our professors. We don't want dark issues on any institution. For that matter, we don't want, not just with educational issues, we don't want that anywhere. And anywhere we can provide insight and information, I think it's healthy for this body to be able to stand together to say we're interested in solving a problem. And I personally believe that solving a problem means throwing light at it. so that darkness flees and runs. If I sound like a pastor, it's because I am one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I was about to say very prophetic there, Representative Edmonds.
And I'd like
just-
to, can I, Mr. Chairman, can I
Please,
thank
please.
Representative Edmonds, because we did have that conversation in appropriations about the funding, and I appreciate him bringing it up here because not all of you were at the appropriations meeting. And it is really important that we continue to hold our universities accountable financially, but we also need to figure out if this is something that they do need, that they need to come to the legislature and make sure we can provide these. Because at the end of the day, it's about students that we all care for. And so...
Sure, and I just want to clarify real quickly. I believe you were referring to the emergency blue lights on campus?
Correct. The
Oh,
emergency
so-
blue lights on campus.
Yeah, not just lighting in
Not just
general,
lighting it
Representative
blue.
Edmonds, but
That's right.
you know, we have the blue lights with the talk boxes. So that,
Symbolism is a wonderful thing,
there,
Mr.
there
Chairman.
you go, and you picked right up on that. Now, but as a former university employee, I understand what you're talking about, Dr. Reed. Representative Owens for a question. Owen.
Oh, and thank you. Can't afford the S. Thank you for doing what y'all are doing. I've said this to all my colleagues who sat on this committee for the last few months. I know it's been grueling, it's been heart-wrenching, and I won't belabor the points, but I want to tell you for including, I guess it's paragraph E, and I want to read this, and I'm glad to see this. Paragraph 5, page 5. Any employee, including but not limited to any Title IX coordinator, chancellor, or system president, shall be terminated. And then it gives 2 criteria. And if he is required to make a report pursuant to the section and fails to promptly make the report without cause, or if he, with the intent to harm or deceive, knowingly makes a report that is false. Relieving people of their duties is important at times. Doesn't have to happen every time in life, but this is such a serious situation. As the father of daughters I didn't really worry a lot about my daughters, but I always thought about it when they were on campus. I have a sister who, this never been said in public, was assaulted out here 40 years ago. It scarred her for life. She never got over it. Right by the Lamb to Kai house. But that's another subject. But on this, people have to be held accountable. They must be held accountable. And these words in here that we're going to sign into law, hopefully, shall be terminated. I hope it pursues. And not to go on witch hunts or to hurt people unwittingly or for no reason. But if people try to cover up crimes, because that's what we're talking about crimes, then things need to happen. I assume these would go into the criminal world as well. Because if you make the world I came out of in the military, in the federal government, if you made a false report and stuck it in the mail and you circulated it, not only you're lying to your boss, you're committing crimes. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for having the courage to do this, all of you, and for sitting through all of this that was so heart-wrenching. Like Representative Edmonds says, light is the best thing. Sunshine gets rid of all sorts of things. So keep up the good work. Thank you. We are listening, and we're pursuing this as hard as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Owen.
Thank you, Representative Owen. Okay, I have a couple of questions, and mainly following up on what Representative Owen just asked. When we talk on page 3, line 11, talking about terminating employees, I'm just wondering, if an employee who receives notice, now how do you envision that working? I'm sorry, page 3, line 11.
I have 2 copies of the bill.
This would be prior to amendments. It's section 3, number 4, 3-4. On the copy of the bill that I have, it's page 3, line 11.
Unfortunately, my fabulous legislative assistant, Allison Cohen, incorporated amendments to help me follow, and so I don't have the same copy as you have.
We're going to get you a copy.
Okay, so-
And I just want to know how you envision this working, because the question was asked to me at one point, and I wasn't going to ask, but now that Representative Owen brought it up, I think it's a valid follow-up. And what it's talking about, it's defining a responsible employee, and it means any employee of an institution who receives notice of or witnesses an incident. Certainly, if they witness an incident, absolutely they have to report. But I guess the concern was that I received was if they receive notice of it. What constitutes receiving notice? I mean, if he overhears a conversation where somebody says, "Oh, did you see what happened last night?" Is that receiving notice? Will that employee stand to maybe be terminated if he doesn't report that he overheard a conversation that was talking about some incident that may or may not have occurred?
And I'm going to let Dr. Hunter Reed just
Yeah.
answer this, because we did very much discuss how to come up with this.
And I'm sure, and I wish I would have seen
University
some of those.
presidents, I think, would be better to answer this than I, because it was based on conversations about when people weren't sure if they were
So
That's
definition. And so I'll let Dr. Hunter Reed.
I was trying to see if the person from START was here as well, or one of the university folks, because I want to make sure I'm not confusing two bills, because one of them said if a person reports in a public conversation or in an academic report, that it's not reporting, right? So you have to come to a person to say, I want to speak with you about a terrible incident that has happened to me, as opposed to overhearing or in a public forum hearing it, or a student writing it in an academic letter.
And
or
that
an
would
academic
make
conversation.
sense.
Yes. So I want to make sure.
Hello, Dr. Akai Smith, Southern University. You're absolutely right, Dr. Reed. We have made available responsible employee reporting forms, and the official report of behavior of sexual misconduct is only looked into, or it would apply to this bill, should there be a formal report from the responsible employee, not an example of overhearing a conversation.
Okay, and that's in the bill? I understand, if it's in policy, but I want to make sure that we're not creating something in the bill that goes past what the policy will be. Because the bill says specifically receives notice of, but it doesn't define it, that I see. I may have missed it.
I see. So you're
Anyone
asking,
know?
do we define receive notice?
Yes.
Is what you're saying. I don't think the bill currently defines receive notice. It certainly could.
Okay. We might have to work on that between here and the floor, if you don't mind.
I would welcome that, Mr. Chairman, because that is a question that I've even received via email from people, like, what if someone writes a paper in one
Probably
of their
the
classes?
same ones that are emailing me.
So we do need to make sure that we clarify what receives notice means.
Chairman, what Dr. Reed said sounded like a good definition.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know about that. But
Well,
let's make sure we get.
sounded like it. That sounded like it.
We have an attorney at the mic. Maybe can we hear from her as well? It's from
Sure. Please.
And I can provide some clarification. I don't know if it's in the amendments or the original part of the bill, but there was language so that if the responsible employee was at a Take Back the Night event, or an event where a student was speaking publicly about something that happened to them, there would not be an expectation that that responsible employee would be required to report. The same thing would be if it was in an academic exercise. So if you're writing a paper.
Yeah, I saw those exceptions, but I didn't see the exception that I was emailed about. If he happens to overhear a conversation, or he or she happens to overhear a conversation where it's mentioned that something happened, are they subject to termination because they don't report that? That was the concern that was raised to me, so that's why I'm asking the question.
Right, and it is when the student reports to you, when the complainant is reporting to the responsible.
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. But what's not clear is what happens if you overhear it. Representative Hilferty, can you help us on this?
Well, I mean, look, this is my understanding of it would be that if you overhear it, I'm not reporting it to you.
But the bill says received notice of. What does that mean?
Okay. Maybe what we can do is pull Senator Mizell's bill had some language related to this, which I think enumerated the different instances where one would not be required to report.
We do have two of those, but we don't have the overhearing
No,
conversation.
what our
piece.
attorney friend here just told us is definitely in the bill. But the question that was raised, actually there were a few questions that were raised to me about what if I just overhear somebody talking about it? Did I receive notice? Am I going to get fired because I don't say something? Or is that going to create false reports because I'm afraid of being fired?
Is it, let me ask Chairman Garofalo, if it's specified that it is directed to you, reported to you, would that clarify that? Because
I think so, but I think we're going beyond that. If I'm hearing you guys correctly, if I'm interpreting what you're saying.
I think what you're asking for is a definition of receive notice.
Yes.
Yes.
In law and policy.
I think we can clarify that.
I
Yeah,
believe
I
we
think so
can
too.
Clarify that. Yes.
And certainly the way Dr. Hunter Reed stated it just a minute ago, that makes
Yeah.
sense to me. And I think that that will give a little sense of comfort to employees who may not, feel comfortable, because they don't want to start reporting false things, but they don't know if it's something that they have to report mandatorily. Okay, that answers my question. And just one other thing, with the MOUs you mentioned, they're going to be in writing, which is a good thing. Does Title IX specify what has to be in those MOUs? Or do we have any mandatory reporting to police? How does that work?
The MOUs current law does state, I don't know, I don't have it in front of me, but current law does state that the signatures on the MOUs are to delineate responsibilities between parties that have jurisdiction within that same location. Campus police, if it's sheriff, if it's city police.
But I guess I'm getting more toward what the policy is. Does Title IX say what the policy has to be? In other words, does it give a list of infractions that would be mandatory reporting to the police? How is that? How are you guys defining mandatory reporting to law enforcement as opposed to just campus enforcement?
I see. Let me phone a friend on that one because I know that the
You only have
uniform
one phone a
policy-
friend left. No.
running fast. I'm gonna have to ask for help here, but I'm pretty sure that the uniform policy specifies, as the law does, that we have to have an MOU, but I don't think it speaks to what
Content.
Yes, what is reported and what is not from a campus to law enforcement and sheriffs.
And I've received a couple of questions.
Okay.
When does it go to law enforcement? When is it mandatory?
Okay.
Because it
We'll
looks
get that.
like we have it's a limited list that you have here, and it says including any of the following, but it doesn't that doesn't say in addition to or anything else. So it's a limited list, which it's laid out pretty well and defined pretty well. So I compliment you on that. I think it's pretty tight, except for the couple of questions that I asked. Would you like to expound on what's required to be reported to law enforcement?
So there is no requirement that if you're involved in a Title IX process, that there is also you're required to be part of law enforcement as well. I don't know if that answers your question. But
It does. I'm just wondering. So each campus will then have their own MOU that would have different criteria for reporting an incident to law enforcement.
The MOU is designed to make sure that, well, a couple of things. If something happens off campus and involves a student, you want to have a relationship with the local law enforcement so that you know that an incident, perhaps a sexual assault or misconduct, occurs outside of your campus. So it gives you an opportunity to have shared information. I think
It goes both ways.
Right, both ways.
Okay.
So if there's something on the campus that's a crime that needs to be reported to law enforcement, we want to make sure we're doing that. If law enforcement is aware of something that the campus needs to be aware of, we want to make sure that's happening. But your question is an important one, and I'm going to take a note of that. Do we have uniformity in what we share with them and what they share with us, regardless of the campus?
Well,
And I'm not sure the answer on that.
Plus, I'd like to know at some point, maybe we should even put it in the bill, when the campus is mandatorily required to report to law enforcement. I think that's a question that a lot of people have asked. Do you have anything on that for us?
I don't think we want the campus to be required to do that because there are some instances where the complainant does not want to be involved in the criminal justice process. So it is completely possible, and it happens, where they're involved in Title IX, but they're not necessarily involved in a criminal process as well. And so you still want the complainant to have the option. And if they want to report to law enforcement, absolutely go ahead. You can have two things going at the same time, but I don't want to put the complainant in a position where, because you have reported to Title IX, you have now triggered law enforcement.
Sure, and I didn't mean to imply that I think we should. I just want to know when. That's all. So if there's no mandatory reporting, then it's totally up to the victim.
Correct.
Okay, all right. All right, you've answered all my questions. Any more questions, members? Okay, we have a few more people who'd like to testify. Thank you guys again very much, and I'm sure you'll be back at the table, Representative Freeman, but we have some witnesses that would like to come to the table. In no particular order. These are in favor and would like to speak Erzola Clavis, and I think that was Erzola that was at the mic. Would you like to make a statement? Well, come on to the table for us, Erzola. Am I pronouncing it correct? Lee?
It is very phonetic. Erzola.
Erzola, okay. It is phonetic. Joshua Stronantics, is it another one? LSU students, Tigers Against Sexual Assault. I'll just call you Joshua if you don't mind.
Yes, that's perfect.
Let's do two at a time. So if you guys would just state your name and your affiliation for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Erzola Cleaves. I'm a staff attorney with the Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is our main office. Y'all have heard me speak many times already, so I will be very brief. I do want to thank Representative Freeman for bringing this bill. I'm very excited about this bill. I know this bill talks about accountability, and sometimes that can seem more daunting, but I would like to think of this bill as an opportunity for the institutions to show their students that we're going to protect you. We're going to keep you safe. It's an opportunity to have students who stay at Louisiana schools. It's an opportunity for students to graduate from these schools because they aren't leaving because they've been a victim of sexual violence. They aren't leaving because they're scared. They're staying here. And it's an opportunity for them to stay in Louisiana because they're not running back home. They can stay here. We have educated college graduates and above who are staying here because they're not running back home because of something that happened at school here and because they feel safe here. They feel that the institution is going to protect them. They feel that if the institution doesn't do what they're supposed to do, they have other ways to be protected. And so I see it as a great opportunity to have your students feel protected and also to hear from your students, the climate surveys, and having a way to incentivize them and to be creative. Students, they have their cell phones. There's so many ways. I know when I was in college many years ago, if you had pizza, I would probably show up. I was a huge pizza fan at the time. The adage was feed them and they will come. But there are many different ways to incentivize us and to hear from students and to have students say every 3 years, yes, y'all are on the right course and we feel safe, or there's a lot more work to do. And so I thank you for this time, and I thank you for hopefully passing this bill.
Oh, it wasn't that long ago that you were in college, was it?
Longer than I like to share.
Well, and it's also an opportunity, you didn't say, for the legislature to weigh in and say that, yes, we're trying to do what we have to do to protect students as well. No question. So very well said. Joshua?
Hi, how's it going? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can you say your name for us and your
yes,
affiliation?
Absolutely. It is Joshua's Photanics.
That's why I had trouble with it.
Very interesting. But thank you for allowing me to share this morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to second what she said about pizza. I work a lot with high schoolers in my youth group, and they love pizza. They show up anytime there's food. And me currently, as a college student, if you say there's food, I will be there. I was in the cafe before I came here because I heard there was food. So it's a fact. But I'm a student at LSU, and I'm also a member of the executive board of Tigers Against Sexual Assault, a committee that is a huge part of what's happening on LSU's campus, trying to make changes and reforms with the Title IX and sexual assault policies that the school has. And I'd like to keep it short and sweet today because I know that you guys have a lot more on your agenda to cover. But I'd like to share that the students at LSU do support HB 409. And as we've seen in the past decade, at LSU and other schools as well, but I know more about LSU since I'm a student there, that the administration, staff, and faculty have not been fully aware of their role as mandatory reporters. These roles are critical to the safety and recovery of survivors of sexual assault and power-based violence. As you know, as many of you know, students went to LSU officials to report their abuse, and instead of fulfilling their role as a mandatory reporter, they covered it up to protect the reputation of the university and to cover their players. And we all have seen how this has worked out. This has led to lots of money being spent, lots of different issues arising, and most importantly, people not feeling safe going to report to the school. I've talked to a couple people in my role at Tigers Against Sexual Assault, and they have said they don't feel comfortable going to LSU. They don't feel comfortable going to the Title IX office. They don't feel comfortable doing XYZ that the school lays out because of what they've seen in the past. Because these roles of as mandatory reporters, as these positions in the school aren't clearly defined. They don't feel like LSU would properly handle these situations. And I feel like this bill, HB 409, would help to set those clear. I think that lots of times when these people in the past would go to report to their coaches, when they'd go to report to the administration in the sports, they would the people who didn't report these, the administrators who didn't choose to report this, continued the abuse of this victim, of this survivor, by not reporting properly. They continued and allowed the system that was put in place to protect them, to actually abuse the survivor and make the situation far worse for that person. I think this bill would help to strictly define and clarify the role of mandatory reporters and punish those who fail to do their responsibility as a mandatory reporter. I think that the term mandatory reporter is very clear, but it's apparent some people didn't understand that. I know we talked a lot about money, and this is a fiscal session, as we all know. And I think that this bill, not only will it help protect survivors and help solidify the system that is put in place, but I think it also has the potential to save the university and the state money. The LSU is currently spending millions in order to set up the Title IX office the right way and do all these different things, which I think is great, but it's also in lawsuits worth millions of dollars, in part due to the lack of action of mandatory reporters. I think with this bill in place, with strict and clear guidelines of what a mandatory reporter is, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to respond, all of these things that this bill encompasses, along with the training, along with the different things that Representative Freeman has added to this bill, I think it would help save the university, help save the state money, along with making the system something that survivors can trust in again. Making the system something that, say someone is assaulted, someone is a victim of this power-based abuse, they feel comfortable going to LSU, they feel comfortable going to their coach, they feel comfortable going to their professor, and they're able to get the help that they need rather than sit in silence and continue to feel the pain without any relief. In conclusion, I would want to thank you guys again for hearing me, and I hope that these things would be considered and that you would pass HB 409 through committee and into a law. Thank you.
And as the representative for your organization, have you had an opportunity to attend the Board of Supervisors meetings as they've been talking about this issue?
I have not. We also have one of our presidents here from Tigers Against Sexual Assault, and she has. I had conflict.
Well, just my question is, I mean, it looks to me, it appears to me like the Board of Supervisors are taking a lot of steps to correct the issues that they've had in the past.
Yes.
And absolutely. I just wanted to get you to see if your organization had an opinion on how they're doing with it and where they're going.
We do. And I'll let Angelina Cantelli. I know she's
okay.
Well,
yeah, we'll call her up. I didn't know if you were able to say it or not. And just for the record, just to let you know, if you're referring to me, my questions weren't regarding who the mandatory reporters are. My questions are what needs to be reported.
Right.
That's the only that a little fine line of distinction there. So
absolutely, yes, sir.
But really appreciate you guys coming to testify today.
Absolutely, thank you.
Oh, I have. Hold on, don't run away too far. Representative Wright, you have a question?
It's not a question. I just wanted to tell Joshua I really appreciate what you're doing, and I think you just did it really well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well spoken. No question. Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, wishing to speak in favor, Angelina Canatelli, Tigers Against Sexual Assault. Okay, Angelina's coming up. And then Carrie Williams, no affiliation listed. Carrie?
Hi.
Angelina, please,
yes.
Go ahead.
I'm Angelina Cantelli. I'm the co-president and founder of Tigers Against Sexual Assault. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for having me. To answer your question, I will say that I've been at several online or in-person board meetings watching all the updates, and our organization is cautiously optimistic for the changes that are coming at LSU. I think there are a lot of positive things that are happening, but I will say that we've also been discouraged at times. Obviously, our university has failed in many ways, and we want swift change, but we want it done appropriately and effectively. And something that has been frustrating to myself, our organization, and I think just students as a whole, is what Representative Owen was speaking to previously, the need for accountability. And LSU has operated under the pretext that there was no policy in place to terminate people who failed to mandatory report before this. And I think that's accurate. And so this bill puts that policy in place, and it gets rid of any situation in the future where us students don't feel like we're protected and heard, and we don't feel like we're understood. And so I know that a few weeks ago, LSU was asked by Representative Marcel if they had that policy in place, and they said not yet. So I'm hopeful that it will just go in place through this legislature, and we don't have to worry about waiting for our university to draft it. So that being said, I just wanted to briefly say a few things about this year at LSU and what our organization has done. So when everything first came out in USA Today in November, we organized a protest of 300 students who came and expressed their concerns. And one of those concerns and demands was the termination of people who played a part in covering up these allegations. Since then, we've met with administration several times. I am constantly talking to President Galligan, it feels like, and I very much appreciate him. And we have also organized other protests since then. When the Hush-Blackwell report came out and it was announced that no one was going to be terminated and that suspensions were going to be given instead, a lot of students were really upset. And so we organized a sit-in at the athletics facility, and we went from there. And I think that it's been interesting to see how our university is willing to continue to speak to us, even when we disagree on some key issues, because we know that at the end of the day, there's a bigger cause that needs to be worked on. But it is discouraging sometimes as a student leader to feel like your cries are falling on deaf ears. I'm really looking forward to the culture changes coming to LSU, but I'm also aware that there are some students who don't feel that these culture changes can be made adequately if these employees are still allowed to work there. I'm not of that opinion. I know that change can still happen, but I'm hopeful that no one will have to feel like that in the future if this bill is passed. And so I just wanted to say that I know all of you are probably aware of what's happened at LSU and in the media, what's been reported, but you haven't obviously been able to see the internal conversations we've been having as students, and you haven't been able to feel what so many survivors have felt this year. They felt neglected and ignored and reminded of their abuse once again. And I can't imagine reporting an abuse to someone you trusted, having that covered up, and then that person remaining to work at the university that you either went to or currently go to. And so I think we all as citizens, but you especially as legislators, have a responsibility to ensure that no student across Louisiana feels like that again. And so I just wanted to come and express that on behalf of Tigers Against Sexual Assault, and thank you all for considering this bill, and I urge you to pass it favorably.
Well said, Ms. Canatelli. Thank you very much. And Mr. Williams, who are you with? You just representing yourself?
Good morning. My name is Pastor Kerry Williams. I am the founder and CEO of KJW Ministry, and also community leader for the Baton Rouge area. What this bill means to LSU, I support LSU 100%. I am a Tiger fan 100%. This bill, ladies and gentlemen, is a fable. What she was saying. We need you to support this bill because I watch too many people get assaulted. As you know, being a pastor, I get phone calls 2-3 o'clock in the morning from families and parents concerned about their children. It's my problem as a pastor is because we trusted y'all guys to represent us. And as a pastor it's not fair for this to happen to LSU people or to anyone that lives on campus, that lives anywhere on campus. So I'm asking you to please listen to the citizens of LSU. Listen to them, because it could be your child. It could be your son. I'm a pastor, and I have buried 1,000 people, but I will not sit around and look at people assaulting other people. I will continue coming up here. I will continue fighting. And if I have to continue standing, I will stand and fight for the citizens of LSU and the citizens of Baton Rouge. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you for coming to testify today. I don't think there's anybody up here that disagrees with anything you said. Okay, next up, Ricky Bryant would like to speak, representing himself. And we have a few cards of people who will provide, they have green cards, will provide information if requested. Morgan Lamadre from Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response. Present will provide information. Bo Due from Louisiana District Attorneys Association. Present will provide information if necessary. Mia Lajeune, LSU student, Tigers Against Sexual Assault. And I'll read the rest of the cards, but Mr. Bryant, welcome to the Committee on Education.
Thank you so much, Chair Galfalo. My name is Ricky Bryant. I am from Bossier City, Louisiana. I am a current junior mass communication major here at LSU. I'm a proud Tiger, and I'm just going to jump right in. I normally would write out a essay of things I wanted to say here before you guys, but I had to rush from doing a quiz this morning. So as a student does, I'm just going to try and go off the dome here with with everything, trying to show you how smart LSU has made me. All right, so in the spring of 2019, I was sexually assaulted, and for that entire semester, I endured a horrible cycle of abuse. It sent me down a path that led to reliance on drugs and alcohol, and led me down a path to a place where I never thought I'd have to go, and really made me into a completely different person. Ruined my outset on life, ruined my goals, my drive was not there. And so I want to impress upon everyone here today how absolutely damaging sexual assault is, and the experiences of survivors can be for their education. I was a really involved freshman when this happened to me, and then after the entire experience, and as when I was able to finally escape the cycle of abuse, I had no want to be involved on campus. I didn't want to be in student government anymore. I didn't want to be in a fraternity anymore. I didn't want to work at where I was treated well, paid well, and everything like that. And it sent me down on a downward spiral where I wanted to take my own life. And so I want to impress upon everyone at this committee how important what you're doing today is, and how everyone in this state needs what you're doing today, and you need to urge to move favorably on this legislation. I think everyone here, every student here can impress upon you, and every probably legislator up here today, how disappointed we are in all the news coming out of LSU, and the leadership there, that some of the decisions they've made. I've talked with Interim President Galligan about how I don't agree with the decision to keep some employees around, but as a student, I can't fire them myself. I don't have that power. But this bill does what should have been done a long time ago, does what should have been the bare minimum this year, last year, and years before that. And then I want to mention, I'm a student worker. I have been since my assault happened. It actually both started at the same time. And so I want to say, in February 2019, I took the state-mandated sexual assault training that university employees take, and I have been well aware since then of the mandatory reporting requirement for every employee. So what you're doing today is the bare minimum, and students who are fresh onto college campuses understand the reporting criteria. And so the excuses that you're going to hear about how employees were unsure of the pathways for their reporting are absolutely false. A student can get it. A student can understand it, and a student can follow it. So can someone that makes 3 figures from my tax dollars. So I just want to say that. And then this bill is an easy way to shift the culture at LSU. We hear that a lot. Women's caucus hearings, in the civil law and procedure hearings for Rep. Freeman's bill. This is an easy way to shift that culture. Shifting the culture is not something that's done just by this bill, but it's something that every student is dying for. And so that's another easy way that you guys can help make a lasting change on campus. And I just want to say, please move favorably on this bill. And expedite it through everything that we need, because right now the state needs you, the students need you, in and out of state students need you. So please, thank you very much.
Well, from speaking from the dome, you did very well. So LSU has prepared you for.
Yes, I am a mass communication student, so I guess it makes sense.
A little Tiger TV somewhere in there.
I'm not student government, so maybe that does a little bit of that. But
well, thank you for coming to testify and sharing your experience with us today. We really appreciate it, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Representative Freeman, if you want to make your way back to the table while I read the cards. These are all in favor, not wishing to speak. Rodney Braxton, Southern University System Foundation. Lenny Kopsky, UNO Foundation. Tina Van Scherhoven, the Governor's Office. Zach Lemoyne, Governor's Office. Devontae Lewis, Louisiana Budget Project. Cynthia Posey, Louisiana Federation of Teachers. Jordan Boucher, Tigers Against Sexual Assault. Barry Irwin, Council for a Better Louisiana. These cards, Dr. Reed already spoke. These cards are here and will provide information if requested. Tom Galligan from LSU. Gina, I think it's Doucet from LCTCS. Is that correct, Gina? Dr. Amber Blair, LCTCS. Erica Calais, University of LA System. Aimee King, University of New Orleans. Paul Thomas, UL Lafayette and the UL System. Jim Henderson, UL System. Ray Belton, Southern University System. Akai Smith, Southern University System. And Jeremy Gaithy, Southern University System. We had, well, great representation here. I didn't get to, maybe with the masks on, I can't tell who everybody is. Appreciate all of you guys coming to our little committee meeting today. It's an important issue. Representative Freeman, would you like to close?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members, and thank you, students. This bill introduces statutes relative to higher education, and it's all about our students and safety and accountability. So I carry this instrument, as we say, through the legislature, but I do it on behalf of survivors of sexual assault, survivors of abuse, the many who had the courage to come and testify in this building to tell their story, and those who are not able to share their stories at this time. So I appreciate favorable passage out of committee and hope to work with everyone going forward, but I do this on behalf of the safety and accountability of our students.
Excellent, concise, and to the point. Thank you, Representative Freeman. And I had one more card that I missed. It's Meredith Smith from Tulane University, also here for informational purposes. All right, members, Representative Freeman has moved that we report HB 409 as amended. Any objections? Seeing none, that bill will be reported favorably as amended. And thank you so much again for bringing the bill, and thanks to the other female members of our committee who stood with you.
And I should acknowledge that Representative Edmonston came in to say hello to.
I didn't see you.
She had to leave.
Okay.
And so, yes, all the Women's Caucus members who were involved. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on this, Representative Freeman.